Dorothy is 74 years old. She lives alone in a brick ranch house in Dayton, Ohio. And for the last 3 years, almost every dinner she has eaten came out of a green box with the words "Heart Smart" printed on the front. Dorothy was doing what she believed was the responsible thing. Her blood pressure had crept up after her husband passed. Her doctor told her to watch her sodium, and so she walked into her grocery store's freezer aisle and filled her cart with meals that had hearts on the packaging, lean proteins in the photos, and calorie counts under 400. On the second Sunday of last October, standing at the coffee table after church, Dorothy tried to say the words, "See you next week," and heard her own voice come out wrong. Slurred. Her right hand would not grip the cup. A friend called 911, and Dorothy spent that night in a hospital being evaluated for a transient ischemic attack, what doctors call a TIA, a warning stroke. In the next 25 minutes, I am going to walk you through the 4 specific categories of frozen meals that are sold as heart-healthy and yet can push an older adult's sodium, phosphate, and processed food load into dangerous territory. I am going to show you the one word on a food label that the FDA actually regulates, and the marketing phrases it does not. I am going to give you a 4-letter ingredient fragment to scan for on the back of any box because it points to an additive most shoppers have never heard of. And I am going to tell you which of these 4 meal types is marketed most aggressively to people watching their blood pressure because in my view, it is the worst of the 4. And I will explain exactly why before this video is over. One more thing. Nothing in Dorothy's freezer was expired, recalled, or mislabeled. Every box was legal. That is precisely the problem, and it is where we need to start. Here is exactly what this video will give you. Promise number 1. The 4 specific frozen meal categories, named plainly, with the exact ingredients inside each one that work against an aging cardiovascular system. Promise number 2. The 2 sodium numbers published by the American Heart Association and the simple freezer aisle math that shows how a single box dinner can swallow most of a full day's budget. Promise number 3. The difference between the one label word the FDA legally defines and the shelf full of phrases it does not. So you can tell regulation from marketing in about 5 seconds. Promise number 4. A 5-step protection plan you can run on your own freezer this week, including the swap that keeps the convenience of frozen food without the risk. And promise number 5. The single most common mistake I see older adults make in the freezer aisle, the one Dorothy made for 3 straight years, which is judging a meal by its fat and calories, while never once turning the box over. Every one of those 5 gets paid off before we finish. Before we go further, do me a favor. Type your age in the comments. It genuinely helps me see who is watching, and it helps this video reach the people who need it. A word about who is talking to you. I work in preventive health education for older adults. My week is spent reading ingredient panels, federal labeling rules, and cardiovascular research, and translating them into plain language for people whose doctor appointments last 15 minutes. I am not your physician, and this video is education, not medical advice. What I can do is show you what the research and the labels actually say. So let me tell you the rest of Dorothy's story, because the details matter. Dorothy taught 4th grade for 31 years. When her husband Gene died in 2021, cooking for one felt pointless, and her daughter in Columbus, worried about her, actually encouraged the frozen meals. They seemed like the safe choice. Lean turkey medallions, grilled chicken with vegetables, a roasted vegetable power bowl with quinoa that had a little heart printed right next to the nutrition seal. Dorothy ate one of these meals nearly every night, sometimes two on days she skipped lunch. Her blood pressure readings at her checkups told the story in slow motion. In 2022, 138/84. In 2023, 146/88. By last summer, 154/90, and her doctor added a second medication. Nobody at any point asked her what was in her freezer. Then came that Sunday in October. The slurred speech lasted maybe 10 minutes. Her grip came back in the ambulance. At the hospital, they told her how fortunate she was, because according to the stroke overview published by Medline Plus, the health information service of the National Institutes of Health, a stroke happens when blood flow to part of the brain is cut off, brain cells begin to die within minutes, and immediate treatment is the difference between recovery and permanent damage. ATIA is the warning shot. When Dorothy's daughter finally emptied the freezer and sat down with a calculator, the math was ugly. The turkey medallion dinner, 890 milligrams of sodium. The chicken and vegetables, 960. The power bowl with the heart on the box, 1,140 milligrams. In a meal marketed to people exactly like Dorothy. With her morning toast, her canned soup lunches, and one frozen dinner, Dorothy was taking in well over 3,000 milligrams of sodium a day, while believing she was on a low-sodium diet. Now let me be careful and honest with you. No one can say that frozen dinners, by themselves, cause Dorothy's TIA. Strokes have many contributing factors. What her care team could say is that her blood pressure had been climbing for 3 years, that high blood pressure is listed by the CDC as a leading risk factor for stroke, and that her daily sodium load was roughly double what the American Heart Association considers the upper limit. And here is what nobody told her, and what nobody may have told you. Dorothy is not an unusual case. She is the exact profile of the shopper these meals are designed for. Widowed or cooking for one, over 70, told to eat healthy. Standing in a freezer aisle, trusting the front of a box, let me explain the mechanism, because once you understand it, you cannot unsee it in a grocery store. Start with sodium. A 2017 review in the journal Advances in Experimental Medicine and Biology laid out the core relationship. Excessive salt intake raises the risk of hypertension, and reducing salt lowers blood pressure, with the effect strongest in people who already have high blood pressure. That last part matters enormously for this audience because as we age, many of us become more salt-sensitive, meaning the same salty meal moves our blood pressure further than it would have at 40. And blood pressure is the lever that matters. A 2022 review in JAMA, one of the most cited medical journals in the world, states it plainly. Hypertension raises the risk of cardiovascular events, including stroke, and one of the first-line lifestyle therapies is a diet low in sodium and rich in potassium. Notice both halves of that sentence. Low sodium, high potassium. A frozen dinner is engineered backwards on both counts. heavy on salt for flavor and shelf stability, light on the fresh produce that carries potassium. Now the numbers. The American Heart Association recommends no more than 2,300 milligrams of sodium per day and says the ideal target for most adults, especially those with blood pressure concerns, is moving toward 1,500 milligrams. Hold that 1,500 in your head and look again at Dorothy's Power Bowl. 1,140 milligrams. One meal. 76% of the ideal daily budget, before breakfast and lunch are even counted. Now the label question, and this resolves something I promised you at the top. There is exactly one health claim word here that carries the force of federal regulation, and that word is healthy. The Department of Health and Human Services and the FDA finalized a rule defining what a food must be before the label can use the term healthy, and that definition includes criteria on sodium. The FDA also maintains published requirements for any manufacturer using that claim, and has moved on front-of-package nutrition labeling as well. But here is the loophole you walk past every week. Heart Smart, balanced living, chef-inspired wellness, fit favorites. Those are brand names and marketing phrases. A heart-shaped graphic is artwork. None of that is the regulated claim. A meal can wear a heart on the front of the box while carrying half your day's sodium inside it, and every bit of that is legal. Dorothy's freezer was not full of lies. It was full of carefully chosen true statements. Low in fat, true. Under 400 calories, true. And none of it told her the one number that was moving her blood pressure year after year. So let us name the 4 meals, not brands because the brands change, but categories because the formulas do not. Meal category number 1, the lean turkey or beef dinner with gravy. This is Robert's meal. Robert is 68, a retired machinist outside Tucson, Arizona, type 2 diabetic, careful about red meat because his doctor warned him about it. So he bought the turkey medallion dinners, sliced turkey, gravy, a scoop of mashed potatoes. What Robert did not know is that the sliced and formed meats in many frozen dinners are processed meats, cured, salted, and treated with additives to hold texture through freezing and reheating. A 2017 review in the Journal of Internal Medicine described the growing evidence linking processed red meat, meaning meat that has been cured, smoked, or salted with additives, to adverse health outcomes. Robert thought he had solved the meat problem by choosing turkey, but processing is the issue. And his gravy-covered dinner delivered 920 milligrams of sodium a night. His blood pressure at his last physical, 149/91. Meal category number 2, the low-fat pasta or rice entrée. This is Margaret's meal. Margaret is 79, a retired church organist in Minneapolis, and she grew up in the era when fat was the enemy, so she buys the pasta primavera and the teriyaki rice bowls, low-fat, meatless, seemingly gentle. Turn the box over and you find 2 problems. The first is sodium in the sauce, often 700 to 1,000 milligrams. The second is that the meal is essentially refined white flour or white rice with sugar in the sauce. A Swedish cohort study published in 2015 in the journal PLOS ONE examined carbohydrate-rich foods, including refined grains and sugar-sweetened items, and their relationship to ischemic cardiovascular disease, including ischemic stroke. And that relationship held across genetic differences in how people handle blood fats. For Margaret, whose blood sugar was already borderline, dinner was a nightly dose of salt and fast-burning starch, dressed up as a light choice. Meal category number 3. The breaded fish or chicken light entrée. This is Frank's meal. Frank is 71, a retired sheriff's deputy in Macon, Georgia, and he bought the breaded fish fillet dinners because everyone knows fish is heart food. Here is what the breading and the fillet hide. Beyond the sodium, which ran 840 milligrams in his usual box, many processed and breaded meats and fish are treated with phosphate additives, used to retain moisture and improve texture. A 2012 review in the German medical journal Deutsches Arzteblatt International raised the concern directly. Elevated phosphate levels in the blood predict cardiovascular events in the general population, and dietary phosphate additives, unlike natural phosphorus in whole foods, are absorbed very efficiently. Frank has early-stage kidney concerns, which makes that additive load land harder. And he had never once heard the word phosphate from anyone. Hold that thought, because in a few minutes I will give you the exact trick for spotting these additives in 5 seconds. And meal category number 4, the one I told you at the start, was the worst of the 4 in my view. The plant-based power bowl. Roasted vegetables, quinoa, a drizzle of sauce, a heart on the box, language about wholesome plant nutrition. This was Dorothy's meal, the one marketed most directly at people watching their blood pressure. Why do I rank it worst? Because it combines the highest trust with a fully industrial formula. These bowls are ultra-processed foods, built from reconstituted ingredients, sauces, and additives. And the evidence on that category is not soft. A 2024 systematic review and dose-response meta-analysis in the journal eClinical Medicine pooled the research on ultra-processed food consumption and found it associated with cardiovascular events, including stroke and transient ischemic attack, with risk rising as consumption rises. Read that again slowly. The category of food Dorothy ate nightly is associated, in a dose-dependent way, with the exact event that put her in the hospital. Robert, Margaret, Frank, Dorothy. 4 different states, 4 different meals. One shared belief that the front of the box was telling them the whole story. So here is exactly what to do, in order, starting with tonight's dinner. Step 1. Turn every box in your freezer over and read 2 numbers, sodium per serving and servings per container. This takes 90 seconds for a full freezer. Write the sodium numbers on the boxes with a marker if your eyes fight with small print. Then do the arithmetic against the American Heart Association's targets. No more than 2,300 milligrams a day, ideally moving toward 1,500. As a practical rule of thumb, if one frozen meal is carrying more than a third of your whole day's budget, it does not belong in a nightly rotation. A meal in the range of 600 milligrams or less leaves you room to actually eat breakfast and lunch. And watch the servings per container line, because some family-style trays list 2.5 servings, and nobody eats 2/5 of a tray. Step 2. Retrain your eyes on the front of the box. From this week forward, the only front label health word you give weight to is the word healthy itself, because that specific term is defined by an FDA rule with sodium criteria built into it. Heart smart, balanced, wholesome, fit, chef-crafted, and every heart-shaped graphic. Treat all of it as decoration, because legally that is what it is. Front of box tells you what the company wants you to feel. The nutrition panel tells you what the food will do. Step 3. Fix the potassium half of the equation. Remember that 2022 JAMA review named a diet low in sodium and rich in potassium as first-line lifestyle therapy for blood pressure. Frozen dinners fail both halves, so when you do eat one, pair it deliberately. A banana, a side of plain frozen spinach or broccoli, steamed with no sauce. A plain baked potato. Now, one important caution, and please hear it. If you have kidney disease or you take certain blood pressure medications, extra potassium is a conversation you must have with your doctor or pharmacist first, not a change you freelance. For many people it helps. For some, it is genuinely unsafe. Ask. Step 4. Rebuild your freezer instead of abandoning it. The freezer is not your enemy. Plain frozen vegetables with no sauce are often frozen within hours of harvest, keep for months, and carry almost no sodium. Plain frozen fish fillets, unbreaded and unseasoned, cook in 15 minutes. Combine those with the pattern described on the Medline Plus page for the DASH eating plan, short for Dietary Approaches to Stop Hypertension, which reports research from the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute showing this way of eating lowers high blood pressure and improves cholesterol. Vegetables, fruits, whole grains, fish, poultry, beans, low-fat dairy. You can build a DASH-style dinner from the freezer aisle in the same 10 minutes the boxed meal takes, for roughly the same money, at a quarter of the sodium. Step 5. Measure, then talk. Change the meals, then check your blood pressure at home, same time each morning for 2 weeks, and write the numbers down. Bring that log to your next appointment and say these exact words. I changed my diet. Here is my log. Do my medications still fit? A 2021 review in the Journal of Clinical Hypertension found that lifestyle changes, including dietary changes, are an effective non-drug approach to managing high blood pressure, and your doctor can only work with what you show them. And while we are here, learn the warning signs Dorothy's friend recognized, because Medline Plus is blunt that minutes matter in a stroke. Remember FAST, face drooping, arm weakness, speech that is slurred or strange. Time to call 911. Not time to lie down and see if it passes. 911 immediately. Now the bonus I promised. The 5-second trick almost nobody in a grocery store knows. Take any frozen meal, flip it to the ingredient list, and scan for 4 letters. PHOS. Phos. Sodium phosphate. Sodium tripolyphosphate. Pyrophosphate. Any word containing that fragment is a phosphate additive, and a 2023 review in the journal Nutrients proposed these industrial phosphate additives as a mechanism connecting ultra-processed food intake to heart and kidney disease risk, precisely because, as that German review also noted, additive phosphate is absorbed far more completely than the natural phosphorus in beans, nuts, or dairy. The label will never total it for you, because phosphorus is not required on most nutrition panels. The ingredient list is your only window. Now the honest caveat. If your kidneys are healthy, an occasional phos ingredient is not a reason to panic in the aisle. But if you have any level of kidney concern, as Frank did, or you are eating these additives nightly across frozen meals, deli meats, and colas, the load adds up silently, and it is worth a direct question to your doctor. Do I need to watch phosphate additives? Most patients have never asked. Most doctors, in a 15-minute visit, have never had time to bring it up. That is the whole picture, and I want to leave you with the number that should stick. 1,500 milligrams, the American Heart Association's ideal daily sodium target, against 1,140 milligrams sitting in one heart-decorated power bowl in Dorothy's freezer. High blood pressure remains, per the CDC, a leading risk factor for stroke, and per Medallion Plus, preventing high blood pressure through heart-healthy eating is one of the most direct protections you have against heart attack and stroke. The protection plan costs nothing. Turn the boxes over tonight. Trust the panel, not the artwork. Pair the meal with potassium if your doctor agrees. Rebuild the freezer with plain frozen vegetables and fish. Log your pressure for 2 weeks and put that log in your doctor's hands. Dorothy did exactly this. Her freezer now holds plain green beans, salmon fillets, and exactly 1 boxed meal a week, chosen at 520 milligrams of sodium. At her January checkup, her home log averaged 134/82. And for the first time in 3 years, the conversation with her doctor was about progress. One more time, because it matters, this video is education, not medical advice, and every change we discussed, especially anything touching your medications, potassium, or kidneys, deserves a conversation with your own doctor or pharmacist who knows your full history. If you have a parent, a neighbor, or a friend over 70 who keeps a freezer full of boxed dinners, send them this video today, and then go look at what is in your own freezer tonight, not next week. If this helped you, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel, because it tells me to keep making videos exactly like this one, and it helps this reach one more person standing in that freezer aisle, trusting the front of a box. I will see you in the next video.